Hello everyone, this is just a quick video of a sheep brain dissection. Beginning with the meninges, not all sheep brains you see are going to have the meninges. The outermost covering, of course, is the dura mater, followed by that is the arachnoid mater, and then the pia mater. You can see the dura mater in this particular picture. You should also be able to identify the hemispheres, right? The right hemisphere is involved in creativity and imagination, spatial awareness. It's under left hand control, so if you're a left-handed individual, you're primarily using your right hemisphere. The left hemisphere, on the other hand, is involved in logic and lists, and mathematics. And so when you're a right-handed individual, you're primarily using your left hemisphere. But these hemispheres are connected via the corpus callosum. You should be able to identify your cortical regions, such as the frontal lobe, which is the location of the precentral gyrus, or the primary motor cortex. The parietal lobe is the location of the postcentral gyrus, or the primary somatosensory cortex. The temporal lobe, which is your primary auditory cortex, and the occipital lobe, which is your primary visual cortex. Now the diencephalon is basically pertaining to your hypothalamus and your thalamus. The hypothalamus is involved in endocrine regulation. On some of the sheep brains, you might see the pituitary gland, which lies inferior to the hypothalamus. It's also involved in endocrine regulation. The thalamus, on the other hand, is a relay center for all sensory inputs. It relays those inputs to the associated cortical regions, except for the olfactory system that innervates the cortical region for olfaction directly. So you should be able to identify the midbrain as a whole. It contains the corpora quadrigema, which is basically just the tectum containing the inferior colliculi and the superior colliculi, and the tegmentum, which is also sometimes called the cerebral peduncle, which is involved in pain and movement. So you should be able to identify the midbrain as a whole. It's at the very tip top of the brainstem. It's the most superior part. And then, of course, your hindbrain includes your cerebellum, which is involved in the coordination of muscular activity. It contains, the pons that function in alertness and sleep and breathing and bladder control. The medulla oblongata is under autonomic functions. So it's breathing and sneezing and vomiting and anything that you're going to do involuntarily without thinking about it. If you're thinking about breathing, you're using your pons. Last but not least, you should be able to identify your ventricles. The lateral ventricle is contained within the corpus callosum. The third ventricle is contained within the diencephalon. So remember the diencephalon is the thalamus and the hypothalamus and the epithalamus, which you don't have to be able to identify. And then there's the fourth ventricle, which extends from the midbrain to the spinal cord. And if you recall, ventricles are just these networks that contain cerebrospinal fluid.